So find a comfortable position. Allow the body to settle. As we turn inward, then we can notice how we're feeling, how the body is feeling first, and then how the mind is feeling. The first step is to take stock. So we notice any tension in the body. And invite it to let go. We check in on the mind and invite the mind to relax and for all the activity of the mind to settle down. And then we might settle our attention on our heart space, whether that means being attentive to breathing or just that area where we seem to locate our feelings of kindness and love, compassion. Can ground ourselves there, becoming more and more settled, more calm, happy, content. And we can just notice how those words affect us. Perhaps softening feelings that we held moments ago. And bring to mind any calming image or calming thoughts that induce kindness and love. And if there's anything arising in the mind that feels stressful, see if you can bring that attitude of kindness and love and acceptance to that. Not trying to push it away or supplant it with something else, but just being open and kind. Accepting that all all thoughts and emotions come from some prior conditioning. We don't have to take ownership of them. But for now, the ground of our being is in kindness and love by our choosing. It's amazing that suggestions like this that we drop into the mind can really make a difference. And of course, that happens because this too has preconditions. We've all experienced kindness. We've all experienced love. So we call the mind back to that. Or we might think of just starting there in this moment. See if you can identify a feeling in your heart space. that goes along with, that matches the words kindness and love. Because it's really the feeling, the experience, the felt sense that we want to develop. The words are just labels, but they do point to experience. So words do matter. And the way we talk to ourselves in our own minds, that matters. So notice if there's anything that brings joy and happiness along with this kindness and love that you can bring into the mind. Or that just arises by putting your attention on your breathing or that heart space. I'd like you to bring up the sense that you have of the Buddha. Sometimes we reflect on those qualities and we chant. But at this moment, I'd like you to think about your impression of the Buddha. Do you experience the Buddha as a kind and compassionate teacher, along with all of the wisdom and ability he had to communicate the Dhamma? That the awakened mind naturally has these qualities of kindness, compassion, happiness, contentment. And when we embody that kindness for living beings, they feel it. And when we realize and we understand that other living beings feel that from us, it also grows in ourselves. It's a beautiful kind of feedback. I've been thinking about how we can strengthen our love for people that don't agree with us. And one way I think is to reflect on some of the teachings we see in this regard in the suttas, and to, when we bring those things to mind, maybe we can bring them to mind at the same time when we think about people we find challenging or opinions and views that we find challenging. So one of the ones we talk about fairly often that I know you've heard before comes from the Dhammapada, really close to the beginning, verses 5 and 6, where it says, "For never is hatred laid to rest by hate. It's laid to rest by love. This is an ancient teaching. When others do not understand, let us who do understand this restrain ourselves in this regard, for that is how conflicts are laid to rest." It's a really beautiful teaching, and it's a teaching that we find in all the major religions. This understanding that you can't overcome hatred with hatred. In the sutta, it's actually, the word isn't usually translated what you overcome hatred with. The word is avira. It's not usually translated as love. This is Bhante Sujata's translation I just read. And because it really literally is non-hatred. And we've talked some before about, what's the difference? Does non-hatred equate to love? It feels like love moves it a bit far, moves the needle a bit further down the track. And I think that's quite beautiful to reflect on. And to see that it really is love that we can bring to these situations. And that is really, I think, what's needed to really bring that up in the heart. And it comes from turning inwards. When we look outside ourselves, we can, of course, see beautiful examples. We learn from, people who live this and exemplify it. I don't mean that, but when we are looking outside, oftentimes it's looking for who to blame. And when we look inside and work with our own experience, we have the opportunity for that to transform to love rather than aversion. Later on in the Dhammapada, this is verses 197 to 199, it says, "Let us live so very happily, loving among the hostile. Among those who are hostile, let us live with love. Let us live so very happily, healthy among the ailing. Among those who are ailing, let us live healthily. Let us live so very happily, content among the greedy. Among those who are greedy, let us live content." And there's one more passage I want to share with you. It's from Angulimala. You all probably know his story. Serial killer who, because of meeting the Buddha, becomes awakened, becomes enlightened. And Even though he became a monk and fully enlightened, a lot of people hated him, understandably. And they would throw rocks at him when he'd go in alms round. And it says that when Venerable Angulimala was experiencing the bliss of release, so the bliss of enlightenment, while in private retreat, on that occasion, he expressed this heartfelt sentiment. He who once was heedless but turned to heedfulness lights up the world like the moon freed from clouds. So seeing that in himself and realizing that shift brings so much difference, such a beauty into the world. Someone whose bad deed is supplanted by the good lights up the world like the moon freed from clouds. A young mendicant devoted to the Buddha's teachings lights up the world like the moon freed from clouds. May even my enemies hear a Dhamma Talk. May even my enemies devote themselves to the Buddha's teaching. May even my enemies associate with good people who establish others in the Dhamma. May even my enemies hear Dhamma at the right time from those who teach acceptance, praising acquiescence, and may they follow that path. For then they'd never wish to harm myself or others. Having arrived at ultimate peace, they'd look after creatures firm and frail. I think this really does come through from the practice, and we can decide to put more attention on it, especially when we're confronted with injustice, violence, the hateful, vengeful rhetoric that we've been hearing so much of. And I think to recognize that we have, probably many people around us who hold this view of not living in hatred, but living in love and recognizing that it's love that overcomes hate. And yet also caught up in a lot of hatred around them. So the response when we recognize this is happening, whether it's happening in ourselves, that we get touched and entangled in these kinds of attitudes, or we see it in others, that what arises is compassion for the situation of human life. Recently talking with, I'm going to read this, I wrote this down. I was talking with Ajahn Pasano the other day, and I think I mentioned this once before, but I was really struck by it. Because when we're thinking about someone, maybe not something so intense, but even when we don't agree with the people in our life, and if we recognize that what's there is suffering, or when we see that in ourselves, through the practice, we can develop this response of compassion. And Ajahn Pasano said that trigger for compassion is just so helpful and necessary, so critical for any kind of realization. And I think it's useful to think about that. If we want to wake up. We want to be enlightened. We want to see the Dhamma so that we really do understand and suffering ends. And what part does that movement to compassion have in that process? That instead of blame, instead of criticism, instead of feeling superior, instead of putting anyone else down, instead of rejection, what we come up with is compassion. What comes up is compassion and love. And that's the healing medicine. So how do you practice this? How do we make this the ground of our approach to life? I mean, it's certainly related to all of the components of the path. I think that our own moral virtue, our meditation practice, our investigation into wisdom is all intimately related, connected to this arising of love and kindness and compassion. It seems to me to be a natural result. And whichever way we come to this Dhamma from, in whatever side of development or aspect that we investigate, seems to open the way to all of the rest of it. So I'm curious, and I'm interested in hearing, what your experiences are and what your questions are around this kind of way of seeing how we operate, especially how we practice, and I'd say, especially when we're confronted with views and opinions that we don't agree with. There may be when we're engaged in some kind of conflict. How can we bring that aspect of Dhamma to it that is loving and kind? And of course, we also have to remember that this doesn't mean that we are passive. To be content, to be loving, to be kind can also have a firmness behind it, which is clear about what's wholesome and unwholesome, what's leading to suffering, what leads to happiness, and not to, budge on that either. That we really are much more valuable, much more influential if we have that clarity around virtue and what leads to happiness and peace. So I think I want to just stop there and see what your questions are, or comments, experiences. Yes, Grace.
I wanted to tell a little story about someone that I once worked with who was so difficult, so caustic. Like every time she was in a meeting with people, she made them feel small, like everybody disliked her. I disliked her. This person was very difficult. And one day I was on a walk with Kyle talking about how this person was so difficult, so bothersome. And I was like, you know what? I can't think of one thing I like about this person. Not one thing. I can't understand why this person's like this. And then I was kind of walking down the street, and then I thought about it a little more, and I was like, but you know what? I love her pure consciousness, and maybe that's enough. And it was enough for me to remember that, there's an enlightened version of her too. And man, like no one would choose to be so annoying. And when I had to work with her, like when I was given the choice not to collaborate with this person, I always took that choice not to collaborate with her. When I was in a meeting with her and she said something really annoying, I didn't hesitate to check her, even if the highest leadership was in the room. I would stand up for myself. But when I had to work with her, really did my best to also love her, and that did not go unnoticed. So I wanted to share the story of, even if I don't like someone, who cares? Liking or disliking is just a function of the thinking mind. I can still love their pure consciousness.
I think that same kind of sentiment kind of comes out in other religions like Hinduism, where they talk about, really seeing the divine in someone, and in that way you can really bring up that feeling of some kind of warmth, and really seeing the best in people. Or another approach is just noticing that we're all suffering. We're all subject to suffering. And it's kind of like what you're saying, do people really want to be so difficult? I mean, I've been difficult in my life. I haven't wanted to be. It's driven by being miserable. you know, can we have compassion for that? And recognize that we can come to these situations from a place that brings some light into it, rather than more struggle and stress. Yeah, thank you, Grace. Yes, Mickey.
The part I connected with, I think when you were reading something like, if hate arises, you cannot hate it. That's not how it goes away. It's just bringing more hate. And in a sense, relating to any kind of inner experience with kindness, in a sense, is an amazing way to go about it. But also relating to the other conversation, which is, if I cannot have my self-kindness to my own hate, to my own disgust, to my own aversion, how can I have that for someone else? So that's how I'm connecting my own personal meditation practice. This is how I'm building up my skills towards actually being able to be like that with others. So that's the connection I made.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it kind of starts with us. If I agree with you, and just being open and accepting of what's there in my mind. It doesn't mean that um, we know it. We know about its toxicity. We understand that. But to be able to be present with it, this really is the first noble truth. To really be able to be present with it and see it for what it is. The distinction between being caught up in the anger, the hatred, the disgust, or whatever it is, or observing it is really the game changer. To recognize that I can be present with this, I can have compassion for this too.
Thank you.
And not act on it. That's the main thing. Don't build it up, those negative feelings. Don't follow the negative patterns. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Nikki. That's really the point of reflecting on all of this. It's like we really do have it right here in our families and in our community, and to be able to really resource ourselves in kindness and compassion and wisdom, I think is so important. And I think it's wise to stay away when the whole tone of a group or becomes hateful, because then people are caught up in things and act in ways that they would never act on their own. And, the opportunities that we have to really influence others may come rarely, but living according to Dhamma and understanding that to think or act in another way is going to be detrimental and lead away from awakening and peace is important. And then when we are committed to continuing to observe in ourselves when hatred or anger or these other kind of attitudes arise, and to be present with them with compassion and allow them to unravel, then we also develop the skill to be able to be with others in that same way, compassionate for their suffering. And to also, at a more, I don't know, the word ultimate comes to mind, but I'm not sure it's a good one, at another level or from another perspective, when we notice how much our thinking mind concocts these problems. And that, it's through being attached to our views and opinions that we run into the greatest conflicts, and seeing the suffering of attachment to the views and opinions that we encounter in others in the same way. So as we think about this, we want to be clear about the distinction between our views and opinions and Dhamma. So when we look at Dhamma, that's the timeless truth. So, like this, hatred doesn't overcome hatred, only love or non-hatred can do that. That's a timeless truth. That's Dhamma. You never see it happen another way. Every time hatred is used to combat hatred, it just generates more hatred. So it's like, if we know that, we see that, then we want to be able to ground ourselves in that, really strengthen that knowledge and wisdom. And then, then we can be an example and a support to people who are struggling with these issues. I think that last statement was an important point. How much of our anger or the anger we witness and hostility and revenge and blaming is really just an escape from having to feel it, to really be present. And this is what the Dhamma asks of us all the time. This is the first noble truth: be present to the dukkha that you experience. There's no other way out of it. There's no other way around it. To be present with it, to develop the stamina. The virya is really, I think of it more as stamina, to be able to be present with what's happening. And like you said, it's these situations in the world are just constantly repeating. There's no break from it. We're not ever going to be able to make this world into a place that's peaceful and everybody's getting along and every group is honored and respected and treated fairly. As much as we all see that that would be the wonderful way to have a world, it's like, it just isn't. It's not in the cards for samsara, and to be able to cultivate this ability to come back to love and kindness every time, to be able to hold the whole mess with openness and compassion. This is really a skill that we develop, and it comes, like I said, it comes from the whole of the path, the sila, the samadhi, and the panya working together. Regina?
I might have a very short question. I'm always thinking non-hatred should be love. Like for me, it collapses into either it's hatred or it's love. But then also thinking, not knowing Pali really well, that if the Buddha had meant love, he would have said it. And so I'm wondering where the space for non-hatred really is. Sort of what is it when it's non-hatred and not love yet, let's say, in case there is no answer to this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the challenge with the word love is that we apply it to different things. And the Buddha would not have wanted to kind of mix in romantic love or sexual desire or any of that kind of part of the way we think of love. Of course, he could have said metta overcomes hatred, but I don't think it would have the same power in a certain sense. The Buddha very much, like in the Sutta on Effacement, he said that the way around these negative mental states is the opposite. The Pali is the way that you get an opposite is put an A in front of the word. So the word Vera, Verena, depending on the part of speech, if you put the A in front of it, Avarena, can we translate that as love? Again, love's going to bring up a lot of different kinds of ideas. If we say non-hatred, like when you eliminate hatred, when there's absolutely no hatred, what's left? I think for many of us, maybe for all of us, it is love. So I think it's like this is a reflection, an experiment we can each do ourselves. Like when that absence of hatred, in the absence of hatred, what do we find? I think that's what we're talking about. Thank you. Marilyn?
I guess I would just, from my experience, one has to be careful about how one expresses that concern, if you want, or non-hatred, however it comes out, because I find sometimes people call it virtue signaling. You say, how can we love these people? And it's like, who do you think you are? And they become more angry. They become angry at you personally for suggesting that we could do something different than hate these people or hate the situation. And I've had an individual couple of situations where somebody's very angry and they come to me and they're like one long-term friend. She occasionally just gets furious about all sorts of things. And I suggest to her that, maybe we can look at it a different way. And she gets even more angry.
Yeah.
And I tell her that I'm just caring about her well-being. I don't want her to have another heart attack from all this anger. And she gets furious. But the thing is, then I just have to let her go. And then, but she keeps coming back. It's like there's two of them, and they from different angles, and they both, it's like they want to be reassured that I care about them, even though it makes them angry to think that I care about them. Or something, you know, like why do they keep coming back? I just don't know quite what's the most skillful way to talk about this to someone who's angry.
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts. One is that when somebody's upset, then the right thing to do is listen. And it can be it can be hard to know when there's an opportunity to actually maybe ask a question or in some way kind of point in a different direction. But that's kind of the idea, holding that space of listening to their suffering. And maybe instead of trying to tell them how to be different, to just notice the suffering, and maybe trying to see what's behind it. Like, why are they so wrapped up in this? What's really behind it? Sometimes you have to listen to people with more than your ears. It's like it's not just in their words, it's also in their body language. What's really behind this anger? Because there's something else. It's fear, it's sadness. So that'd be my advice. And if they want to know if you still love them or if you care about them, then to be listened to is an incredible act of caring, to listen to someone.
I guess I found that the one in particular, she wants me to agree with her. She really wants me to agree that these people are idiots, and sending me all this evidence of how she's been wronged and terrible stuff. And I just said, maybe you can just let it go. And then she gets mad and says,
Sure.
like, don't tell me how to live. Don't tell me how to live. It's all your Buddhist claptrap. So it's like, how do you express how you feel without having the Buddhism sneak in?
Well, I wouldn't try to keep the Buddhism out necessarily, but to try not to sound like you're preaching. I mean, I know you're not trying to, but there, and sometimes we just can't do anything. We just listen. Of course, agreeing with her isn't going to help her at all. And you got to be truthful in that way, but you don't have to say much of anything. And yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of patience.
Yeah. The last time I just said, thank you for sharing. I don't have to wait and see what happens next.
Yeah. Yeah. Memo?
Thank you, Ayya. I wanted to follow up on this subject on negations in Pali and in Sanskrit. There's a scholar, Spanish scholar in Indian religions. He has a great book in Spanish called The Three Jewels, which is a great introduction to Buddhism. Fortunately, I don't think it's translated into English, but it's a big book and it speaks wonderful about Buddhism, but from a more scholarly point of view. And now I'm reading a book of him about Jainism, and they are all about ahimsa. And I'm translating this small paragraph where he explains these negations. And it says, the negative meanings in Sanskrit are extremely rich. The negation of violence does not refer to the absence of a quality, but affirms a state that excludes the denied quality. If
Mm.
himsa is simply violence or evil inherent in the desire to kill, ahimsa, ahimsa is the cultivation of qualities such as friendship, peace, compassion, and well-being. So it's richer than just the negation in Sanskrit, and I assume that it's the same with Pali. And that's after I read this, I highlighted it because it was like really revealing about why in the three right intentions, instead of saying metta, the Buddha says avihimsa, avyapada, or avihimsa instead of compassion. So apparently it's there's a richer meaning in the negations in Sanskrit and in Pali.
Nice. Yes, that's great, Memo. Yeah, so instead of love, it's also friendliness, peacefulness, yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Everything, every quality that it excludes. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's a beautiful reflection. We can really consider what non-hatred is. Vera. Yeah. Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, sorry. Hi. So I'm loving this discussion, and so I'm in a situation where my husband watches the news every evening, and he wants to tell me what the latest indignity is. And so it's very clear that I don't want to know a blow by blow. So, but what I realize is, for him, this is some way that he can hold on to. It's not just going to go totally to hell. I'm not sure really why he's so engrossed in the day by day, but it serves some purpose for him in his functioning. And so but my perspective is, as we're speaking about right now, and the mood we started off with the meditation, to me, that's the key thing, to hold that peaceful thought and dedicate it to the efforts now to release the hostages and bring peace. So there is a movement, which I don't have to know day by day what it's doing, but just hold the view that that is possible in this particular situation. So that's what I feel is the most helpful thing, as you're saying, because, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Yeah, and listening to him is part of the compassion too, having an opportunity to talk about what's happening is probably his way of processing. Can be a lot to take in. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Ling.
Thank you, Ayya. And I really love that formula you mentioned, virtue and meditation and wisdom. And that's a little bit surprise for me to hear. And that's how we practice to develop the compassion and metta to ourselves and others. I want to know a little bit how does it work. I can just from Anne's discussion, and I can see in practice meditation, you can, probably develop that kind of energy, endurance to be able to be with the difficulties. I know how important the sila and wisdom is, But will you be explain a little bit further how that works, and then to develop in the daily life, the compassion and the mental can really raising us?
Yeah, so when I said that, it's not really coming, at least in my mind, directly out of the suttas. It's more of what I see happen in people as they develop and in my own experience. I feel like samadhi in particular, I think, if we shift from seeing samadhi or jhana as something to attain, and we use it more as this way of calming and healing the mind and bringing about these states of peace and tranquility. It is of course for the benefit or the arising of wisdom and insight. But if we also think of it as this healing of the heart and this stabilizing of our mental environment, for when we're not on the cushion, when we're not practicing in those states, I think that we can recognize how helpful that is to be able to be with dukkha, be with suffering. And so the sila, the virtue, is fundamental to the samadhi. There's this lovely quote, this lovely teaching that the Buddha gave repeatedly in his last days, that samadhi, let me see, I think I might have it here. Maybe not. Yeah. Samadhi imbued with sila has great fruit and benefit. And wisdom imbued with samadhi has great fruit and benefit, something like that. It's like you can see how they build on each other. And so when we cultivate the three, sila, samadhi, and panya, which covers the whole of the Noble Eightfold Path, then our whole mental attitude is really a basis, a ground in which love and compassion and the other Brahma Viharas arise. That's how I experience it. I mean, of course, we intentionally cultivate the Brahma Viharas also. So there is this working together. But to have the environment out of which those are stabilized, we need the sila, samadhi, and panya.
Yeah, thank you. This is so helpful for me because in the past, thinking about develop compassion is so important, but I haven't made that connection. Sila is there as a ground, and to generate this clear and solid meditation. Yeah, maybe then I can think clearly, look more deeply. Yeah, thank you for make that connection clear to me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Ling. Anne?
Yeah, this is helpful. And one thing I'm thinking when Marilyn speaks about her friends, when I think about my husband, and they have different ways of dealing with this. But if I just say I don't want to talk about it, it can seem like I don't care. And when I think about it deeply, I'm really heartbroken, as many of us are. And I think that's how we can communicate to those people who want to analyze who's done what to each other, who's doing what to who. I mean, the basic fact for me is that it's heartbreaking. And, it's the current tragedy. Sadly, there'll be others. But if somebody knows how deeply I feel about it, that's very different than trying to respond to a way of looking at it that I don't agree with. So I just wanted to share that thought now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Suzanne?
Yes, thank you, Ayya. Your comments about samadhi particularly were very helpful. And I heard a lay teacher one time refer to fake metta. And I'd never heard that term before, fake metta. And it kind of reminds me of our conversation last night about if we're noticing something unpleasant, to go to something, because we know a lot of techniques, to go to something pleasant. So the question is something about, I think I've heard Ajahn Suchito several times refer to goodwill. And that definition seems a little more neutral. And I'm just wondering if that's a step. Maybe I'll even say before fake metta, like just do something more neutral rather than just like, you know what I call it? I call it pouring chocolate on poop. You know, it's like, okay, I see the poop. Oh my gosh, I've got some chocolate. So then I'm never feeling, the poop. So what do you have to say about all that?
I agree with you that we need to be careful not to put chocolate on poop. I think it doesn't work. You might think of it as spiritual bypassing, this kind of idea that we're, fake it till you make it. Somebody said to me the other day, well, if you say fake it till you make it, like, isn't that just being dishonest? Or, isn't that just kind of covering up what's there and not really facing it? And if that's the case, then we're not going to make much progress. We're not really going to be free of that suffering. But the goodwill is one of the ways to translate metta, and you can translate it as friendliness. Sometimes people benefit from having a translation that's a little. They might find a little more accessible to get started. But I think the main thing probably that is lacking in those cases is really turning towards the suffering that they're experiencing. You got to turn towards the poop and be with the poop and see it for what it is, and try to deal with our disgust, because that's just another layer of poop. And to develop the stamina to do that, to be with it, and really be able to see where it comes from and how to let go of what we're clinging to that keeps generating this poop. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Message in the chat, social media, and even most news sources. Okay, it just went away. I will find it again though, because I agree very much.
Top left, everyone.
Oh, okay. Social media and even most news sources build on anger and ill will to capture eyes. At the same time, it seems important to turn toward the suffering, which requires knowing that there is suffering. Yeah, so it's important to take in what's happening, hopefully from a source that it is less sensationalized, if possible. And yeah, right. Message in the chat, it's important to know where to look for, to take in what happens. Trying to find sources that are really tempered in the right intention, right attitude. And, a strong grounding in ethics and a strong grounding in fairness. Yeah, even the newscasters are angry and building it. So we want to avoid that if we can, and to recognize that, yeah, that probably attracts people. I mean, this is part of why this is so extreme, is that, you know, it does incite in people a certain kind of energy that they may feel is good for them, but it's not. Bhikkhu Bodhi just wrote a great article in the latest BGR newsletter we see. And, you know, so really paying attention to how things are presented is good. But we do want to know what's happening and then drop it. It can take some self-discipline to turn off the media. And also noticing that when people get going on social media, there are no guardrails. I mean, they just will, you know, be caught in the papancha, in the vitriol, and, you know, just recognizing to just stay out of it, stay away from that, find out what's happening in another way. I don't know, maybe we have to start finding N-rated news sources. We have this little like non-rated movies sometimes that we tell you about. I mean, just seeing this, the way anger can truthful is important, and caring about all beings is important in the news approach. So seeing the anger building and all of that, and step away from the sensationalized versions, and try to emanate love and kindness, compassion and joy. James?
Did you just call on me?
I did.
Okay. I was just answering a chat. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks, Suzanne, for that very memorable and simile. It'd take me some time to get that out of my meditation. Well, I was thinking about when people are struggling on how to interact with people when they're angry, frustrated, or whatever. And two things occur to me that are helpful to me, at least. Is one is under anger, there's always fear. Fear is perhaps a little bit easier to have compassion for, but also in my struggles to understand this and how to respond, I have found nonviolent communication to be the perfect vehicle because it really bases your whole interaction with them on understanding how they're feeling and what would make them feel safe, and what they really need right now, and takes everything everything else out of the dialogue. It takes you out of the dialogue, most importantly, or there's an effort to take yourself out of the dialogue at least. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that's really true. And when I was referring earlier to listening to people, first and foremost, when someone's upset, you listen. That's a tenet. I haven't studied NVC so much, but I was trained in Thomas Gordon's various kinds of effectiveness training, which is the same thing. And I assume, for those of you who know NVC well, that that kind of basic rule that when somebody's upset, you listen, and you listen and respond to them to know what, that you're getting what they're saying. And if you're really getting it, then you might be able to help them see also something deeper in themselves. So, not doing it for that purpose. It's not like I'm going to show you what's wrong with you. It's like we really have to watch our intentions, but to genuinely care about what's going on with them and what we might do to just support. And then, looking at our own reactions that are coming up internally at the same time, being present with that also. Yeah. And Suzanne's simile is really carrying forward a great tradition. You see the Buddha making these kind of very striking similes. Ajahn Chah was a master at it. So, yeah, poop on chocolate we can add to the list. Yeah. Thank you, James. I think we'll stop here. Appreciate everyone's questions and sharing. As always, I feel like things go deeper when we talk about what we're really experiencing or we're really confronted with.